So last lesson we spoke about, managing volumes, disks, and partitions. Obviously, we create the partitions and volumes so we can put files on it. Okay, so today we're going to talk about managing these file and other resources. So first of all, our objective today is to give you an overview of file systems, which probably would have answered some of your questions regarding file systems just before. And we're going to look at configuring and managing file access, look at shared folders, talk about work folders, and also printers. Printers is fairly straightforward, but let's talk about the file systems. Okay, so traditionally, Windows or Microsoft has used the FAT file system. FAT stands for File Allocation Table, and basically there's a couple of different instances. There's FAT, FAT32, exafat. So FAT was FAT16 really. So they used 16 bits to create this addressing table, if you like, this file allocation table, and each cell in the file allocation table, if you like, pointed to a location on the hard disk. Okay, so if I want to find something, I go to the file allocation table, look it up, and go to that area of the hard drive. The problem with FAT16 was because it used 16 bits, it could only address up to 4 gigs of space, which is not very big these days, is it? Okay, but FAT32 allows us a lot, 32 bits as the name suggests, and exafat is really for removable media. But there's some other limitations as well. Okay, so like I said, FAT is supported by most operating systems. So if you had FAT, if you went off to the shop and bought a portable hard drive, and when you plug into your computer, more than likely you'll see it's actually formatted with FAT file system. And that's because most operating systems support it, Linux, Windows obviously, and others. But it's usually used for small volumes with a simple folder structure. It's often used for removable media, but there's a maximum volume size, cluster size, and number of files. And the key thing for us today is that FAT does not support security. There's no such thing as file system security for FAT, whereas NTFS does. Now let's actually have a look. How can we actually know what kind of file system we've got? So for example, if I open up my Windows Explorer, you can see this is my PC. This is my physical machine. They've restricted me from being able to see the C drive. But if I use my virtual machine instead, and I'll log in, we should be able to see all the drives. Okay, so if I press the Windows key and E, while clicked into the virtual machine, I can actually also open up the Windows Explorer. So if you can see, I can see the C drive right here. The easiest way to see what kind of file system, there's a couple of ways, always a couple of ways. One way was to open up the disk manager that we were using the other day. So disk management, and you should be able to see that there's the C, it says NTFS. Okay. Another way is to right click on the C drive, open up the properties, and you might notice that happening quite a lot in the worksheets. We do right click, select something. That's like a common thing with Windows operating system. So if we look at this properties of the C drive here, it says it's NTFS. Okay, it says it's NTFS. It tells me a whole heap of other things as well, but the key thing is the file system is NTFS. You'll find that that's the most common file system for Windows operating systems now. So besides the NTFS, besides having the ability to do security, as in assign file system permissions, and we are also able to set up auditing. It also supports large volumes. It also allows us to do quotering, compression, encryption, and has reliability and other features as well. So let's actually quickly just give us a little bit of overview. So if this is the C drive, we can go to the security tab and we can actually assign file system securities here. So for example, users, which represents anyone, has read. Okay? Authenticated users represents anyone who can log in or who can authenticate. And right now, on the C drive, they don't have any powers. But if you look at administrator, if you're not sure about administrator, that is the most powerful account on a Windows system. Okay. Just a second. So if you just walked in late, you'll see that on this session there's a purple collaborate icon. If you click on that and join the Alex Zhao session, you should be able to see my screen. Okay. So I'm just putting it on the screen. If you like, you can turn around and look at Matthew's if you want at this stage. All right, guys, getting back to what we're talking about. So the administrator is the most powerful account on a Windows system. Doesn't matter which operating system, Windows 10 server, there's always an administrator account. Okay, that's always there. And you can see that this administrator account has full control, meaning they can do everything that's available, which is what you expect because that's the most powerful account. We have a couple of other tabs as well. And so obviously we can edit this permissions and we will do that in our worksheet. We can also have a look at some other tabs as well. We can look at the hardware tab, which will actually tell you what hardware you're using. This is a virtual machine, so you see that it's actually a VMware virtual SCSI disk. If I go back to my real machine, so even though I couldn't see my C drive, I can sort of put the C drive in the path and be at the C drive. And I can just right click on this space and select properties as well. And you can see that's also NTFS. And if we actually look at the hardware, it's actually going to give you the actual brand and the model of the actual hard drive I'm using. Okay, so that's another thing. We could also go back to the general tab and we can actually look at we talked about this last lesson. We can actually select compression. If you remember, that just means that it will compress the files on this volume and it will just take up less space, which is good. But the downside is that in order to compress it and decompress it to use it, we have to waste processing power and memory to do so. Okay, just look at this. So if we actually go to, there's also a sharing tab. And basically the C drive is not shared at the moment, and I would not recommend you share your C drive. That's a big no-no as far as a security goes. But when we, in Windows, in Microsoft, when we say sharing, we mean we make this file system or this part of the file system available on the network. So we don't, I don't recommend we should share the whole drive, but we definitely can share folders, individual folders. There's also a quota tab. And this is, we spoke about this last lesson as well, because if we look at it, we could actually enable quota management if we wanted to. And if you remember, quotas are a way of restricting different users' ability to store amounts of files, so they don't actually one user fill it up to the limit and leave not much to other users. Okay. Going back to tools, if you remember last lesson, we spoke about error checking the drive and also using optimization to actually defragment the drive. So it makes the drive contiguous, which means the files are stored in a continuous blocks and can be easily more efficiently read and written. Let's go back to our slide. Okay, so NTFS has all of those that doesn't. In fact, some services, when we do the server, some services will require you to have an NTFS partition to store the cache or store the location. For example, the WSUS service requires you to have an NTFS partition to store the updates so it can be used to be given to other computers. Let's go back to the file system. If I actually look at the downloads folder, so instead of looking at the whole drive, I can go right click on the folder and go properties as well. You can see that there's actually less tabs now. but here within the attributes, there's a little bit more. So we can still compress the content, but it also allows for encrypting the secure data. When we click encrypt contents and secure data, that actually is EFS, encrypted file system. So basically what does that mean? If you've never heard of encryption, encryption is a process of actually scrambling the data. So it goes from a readable state where someone can just read it into an unreadable state, which is basically a mess, a jumbled mess. And only the people with the right key can decrypt it, unscramble it. So why would we want this on our computer, individual computers? Well, let's say this was a laptop. Let's say this was a laptop instead of a desktop, and I took this home to work on stuff at home last night, and I just came to TAFE to do this lecture, and I brought my laptop in. But let's just say on the way here, I caught the train, I put my bag down, I was reading my newspaper, and my train stop, it got to my train stop, and I totally forgot about my bag. I'm sure everyone's forgotten something in their life. Let's say I forgot my bag on the train. Someone picks it up, and you're probably going to think, well, they don't have the password, so they can't log into my laptop. True, but they probably could reset it because they got hardware, the physical hardware in their hands. They probably could reset the administrator password. Or, even more simpler, they could just take the hard drive out and put it in a caddy, like a USB caddy like we all have, and plug it into their computer. You know what? They're going to be administrators of their own computer, aren't they? And as administrators of their own computer, they will be able to have full access to that hard drive that's plugged into their computer. And guess what? Anything that's on your hard drive would then be readable to that person. Okay? And let's say you've got some top secret stuff on there. Okay? Then that becomes not so top secret. And so therefore, if on the other hand, if we had checked this box for this folder, let's say this is my top secret folder, and I check this box to make the contents encrypted, what it means is even if that guy takes my hard drive, takes my computer, busts in as the administrator, whatever, but because he's not logged in with my personal account, he doesn't have the key to decrypt it, and therefore it will still remain a jumbled mess. So even though he's got access to my full laptop, well, it'll cost money to replace it, and hopefully I've got backups for my files, but he can't read my secrets. Okay, so that's a big thing. Going back to here, we can also look at the sharing, and we can share this folder. To share a folder, we can click this simple share, and basically you can see that that's my name and I'm the owner. The owner of a file is the person who creates it by default, but we can transfer ownership as well. But the owner always has the ability to get back into their files or folders they created. If I click share, it will just share it with permissions for me. Let's have a look at it. So you can see there's only administrator and me that has full control and no one else. So really, if I won't share that. I can also use the advanced sharing, and obviously I either check this box or not check this box, and I can share this folder. But I have a permissions tab now, button now, which allows me to share to various other groups and adjust the share permissions. So we'll talk about share permissions and NTFS permissions in a little bit more detail later. Okay, so you guys can't see what you guys just walked in. So maybe, so we had a bit of trouble putting my screen on this device. So in your session, there's this green icon. And if you click on it, if you join the group Alex Zhao, you should be able to have my screen projected to your screen, okay? But if you can't get that on, there's people already connected. Maybe just look at their screen for now, so I don't have to stop and talk about this, because I'm sure there'll be a few other people walking in later as well, okay? So, like I said, besides NTFS and FAT, there's also the REFS. REFS stands for Resilient File System. Okay, resilient file system provides the highest level of resilience and scalability. It can only be used on mirrored storage spaces. Okay, that's a key thing. We talked about mirroring last lesson, didn't we? That's where we had multiple hard drives or two to save the same stuff. So if one hard drive failed, the other drive actually still had it and was able to deliver it. So, Tran, so maybe just look on Matthew's screen for now because I'm doing some demos and my projector is not displaying properly. So if you can just go closer and have a look at his screen so you don't miss out anything, okay? So getting back to here, so we can so basically it automatically detects and corrects errors. So that's why it's resilient file system. It's resilient to failures. It's resilient to corruptions. So we can use it in a two-way or three-way mirror. It supports security and auditing, but it does not support. So this is the difference. So remember, you asked the question: review the file system for the assignment. Well, it doesn't support compression. It doesn't support codering. It doesn't support volume shrinking. It doesn't support quotas. So if you choose the REFS, you got to understand that's basically what it's the difference. Yep.
Sorry, is REFS different from a RAID 1 file system, or is REFS what RAID 1 uses?
REFS needs mirroring. So in order to have REFS, you have to have mirroring first.
Yep.
Mirroring does mirroring, but REFS also does automatically detect and correct errors. Okay, so that's not what mirroring does, isn't it? Mirroring only protects you against hardware failures.
Oh, so this is the software side, not the hardware side.
Well, this is both. Well, if you use the Windows to create mirroring, that's software mirroring anyway. But basically, mirroring protects against hardware failures, whereas this protects against file system corruptions and errors. Okay, so one's at the hardware layer, if you like, and one's at the file's individual file layer.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So obviously one of the things in the assessment was to actually compare the different file systems. Okay. There it is. FAT, NTFS, REFS. All right. Okay. So what is the tools for managing the file system? Like I said, the main tool that most people use, and that's just me, is Windows Explorer or File Explorer, whatever you like to call it. Okay, it used to be just Explorer or File Manager. Depends on how far back, but effectively it's the same. It's the same icon. It's the folder icon, and it opens up and allows you to access all your file system. Okay, so here's my C drive. I can access it. Here's my different files. This is where the Windows operating system is installed to. And if we go in, we can actually see all the things that are in our Windows operating system. And I can access that because I have an administrator user account, whereas a standard user account may not be able to go in and access it. But it's displaying some information, isn't it? It's displaying information in a certain way. It's got the folders, it's got the date it was last modified, and it tells me whether it's a file or folder. And if I keep on going, I can see that there's these files as well. But how do I change this? So this is one of the first things I think I got you guys to do when you started doing the worksheets, is I went to view and I told you to check this box. So if you missed that, that was the file name extension. So in Windows, hopefully in Windows, you understand that every file has a 3-letter extension. And that 3-letter extension tells me what type of file it is, and usually is linked to a specific application that opens it. So for example, if I have a PPTX file, that means it's actually a PowerPoint file, and it's linked. You notice that the icon for it is the PowerPoint icon because it's actually the default application to open it is the PowerPoint. So which means I can double click on this and it will open up in PowerPoint application. Whereas if I double click on this other one, because it's actually a docx file, it's linked to the Microsoft Word and it opens up in Microsoft Word. So whether you show it, you can see that there's no three-letter extensions anymore on this one, or you don't show it, they're always associated with the program. But I like to show it because I like to know what type of file it is. For example, if I look at my virtual machine file, we constantly refer to the virtual disk files as VMDK files. If I turn file extension off, which one's a VMDK file? Which one's the VMX file? If you remember, the VMDK files are the virtual hard disks. The VMX file is the virtual machine configuration file. But right now, I really find it hard to tell. Okay, but if I turn it on, it's quite easy. These are the VMDK files because I can see there's VMDK. I can see that this is the VMX file, and there's various other ones as well. Besides that, you can change the view, so I can make it extra large icons. It sort of doesn't make sense for this type of file, but obviously if you're looking at pictures, photos, maybe you don't want to open the file up entirely. And I'll change the view, for example. Let's go to extra large icon. You can actually look at the pictures. Let's actually, we can change to medium size icons. We can change to tiles, extra small icons, list, content, and the one I like is details. And you're probably going, well, why do you like details? I like details because besides, let's go back to the C drive. Let's go here. Besides knowing what the files are called, I can see when was last modified. I can see what program it's associated with. I can see what size it is. That gives me a lot of information straight away. And if I want to sort, let's say I want to, I can't find the file I want, but I know I did it just, I just worked on it the other day. I might just sort by date modified. And now it lists in the date that these files were modified. I might sort, it says, I've got, I remember there was a huge file. So for example, I'll go in Windows 10, I'll change the view to details. And I know the the virtual hard disk files are really big. So I might sort on by size. And here's these are all my virtual hard disk files. This is my virtual memory, etc. So I can click on these column headings and sort by those things. And name, date modified, type. Type is a good one. I can put all the same type of files together, and size. You can see that there's actually other things you can display. There's hidden items. Okay. So hidden items are files that the operating system or Microsoft doesn't want the average user to see. That's fine. I don't need to see it. And in that folder, there's not much. Actually, let me just actually show. I'll change something. Okay. So show hidden items. So let's just say, I'm just doing this for instance. I'll right click on that particular file, and I check this box to say it's hidden. It's a file attribute. Okay, so that's hidden. You can see that's sort of grayed out a little bit. It's sort of. Can you all guys all see? You can see that's a little bit faint. That actually means it's hidden, but obviously if I actually take away show hidden items, you can see that totally disappears, doesn't it? So why does Microsoft use this? This has been around since DOS days. Basically, it protects the system files or important files from the average user from even seeing it. If they can't see it, they can't mess around with it, can they? But obviously, being we're not just average users. We don't want to be just average users. We want to be the users that actually knows what's going on and then do things based on logic and our understanding rather than be protected by nothing. So I tend to show hidden items so that I can actually see what's there, even though it's got a hidden attribute. But having said that, there's still things that Microsoft hides from you, and it's unless you put the exact path in, you can't see. Okay, like the app data. Where the hell do you find the app data? But that's all the application data, which is part of your profile. You have to actually type in the path before you can actually get there. All right, so hopefully everyone's familiar with the Windows Explorer. On the left, it's this general Microsoft theme. On the left-hand side, you've got your different nodes. You've got your quick access area, which actually are the locations that you've used quite often. For me, there's the link recordings, which is where I put all my recordings. Downloads, which is where I put my virtual machines and downloaded files. And it's got my OneDrive, it's got this PC, and then within this PC, you've got your various drives and network drives. And if I click on one, I see the contents of what is in there over there. So if I click on this, I see what's in it. I double click here, I see what's in it. And if it's actually got an arrow next to it, that means I can expand it. And I can keep on expanding it to dig through the layers of files or folder structure and be able to look through it. You get me, guys? Okay. So I think everyone's familiar with the Windows Explorer. Like I said, you can change the way it's viewed. There's also this navigation pane and review pane. So let's actually quickly talk about that for a second. So within the view, there's this navigation pane. Do we show it? No. Well, then you don't get that left pane. It's kind of hard to get where you want to go now. You almost have to type in the path you want to get there. So go back to view. I'll show the navigation pane, and I can also show some expand open folders. I can show all folders. I can also show libraries. Okay, so this lets me adjust what I can see. The details pane. So this allows me to look at some of the details on this right hand side. You notice that this is new when I turn that on. I can also have a preview pane. So if I actually go back to my C drive downloads folder, if I actually have a preview pane, I can actually click on this and look, it's got a bit of a preview of the file that I've got to open. Well, really, that's kind of good. I can, without double clicking on it, without opening it completely, I can actually have a quick look at what's going to happen in my in the file, and that's quick and easy, isn't it? Okay, so it allows me to go through quickly go through a file to confirm it's correct without having to open it. All right, there's probably many other things as well. I just see one more thing that I might not have. Let me just turn that off. Let me turn off the preview pane. I don't like it. I'll turn it on if I need to, but I don't really like it on all the time. There's other options as well. Change folder search options, which allows me to, whoa, there's a whole heap of things I can change now. There's a lot of things that show encrypted and compressed folders in color. I've already shown all the hidden ones. Oh, look, it says hide extensions for known file types. Show hidden files, show icons and thumbnails. That's a good one. So now let's go back to my pictures and let's see if we can actually, no, it's not showing this one, but it should display thumbnails for your pictures. Okay, that one I think was on my OneDrive and hasn't been synced to my computer yet. All right, let's keep on going. So there's also the command line. Okay, the command line, as we know, is the CMD. We start the command line through a CMD. And this is like back in the first when I first started IT, we only had the command line in the DOS 6.22, even though we had Windows as well. But really, Windows was launched from DOS. So back in the day, you had to learn the command line. I had to learn that if I can navigate, see the downloads, I can navigate through there, and I can do a dir and display there, and I can delete for WOSF. You notice that I'm using the tab. There's a tab completion. Okay, so I'm getting that command wrong. And I've deleted it. So I'm making it. So there's a command line language in Windows, but you'll realize when you start doing Linux, there's a command line in Linux as well, and that's the main way to use Linux, especially if you're using it for a server. I can md test, make a directory, do a directory listing with the dir, and with each, sorry, not dir. With each command, we can also do a switches, and one of the common ones to get help is the /?. And this actually tells me all the switches that's available for this command and some examples on how to use it. But we're not going to focus too much on the command line because, like I said, you guys have the graphical user interface, and this being one of the early subjects that is in your study path of study, we're not going to focus on how to do things in the command line. What we need you to do is just be aware of it. Be aware of it, that certain things can only be done in the command line. And we've mentioned this many times. There's some things we can only do in PowerShell, and PowerShell is another command-based interface. It's a little bit different than command prompts because it uses what's called PowerShell commandlets. And with that, we can do almost anything, if not everything, plus more than what you can do with the graphical user interface. File and folder permissions. So the idea of permissions allows us to control access. We can control access to the file system based on if we have NTFS or REFS file system. Okay. We can add groups. We can add computers. We can add users. So let's actually give you a quick demonstration of what I mean. So if on this computer, we've only got really one user, but if I actually open up computer management, I right-clicked on Start, select Computer Management, I can go to Local Users and Computers. This is the way I use. Like I said, in Windows, there's many ways. This is the way I use because this gives me access to a lot of things in one go. And I can right-click here, go New User. I'm going to create a new user called Alex A. Zhao. That's the username convention I've got here. Alex Zhao is my name. And I'm going to give myself a password. I notice I unticked the change password on first logon here. It was like that, but I unchecked it. Why do you think this is checked by default?
So that for new users, when they type in their given password,
yeah,
the administrators, they can choose their own custom password that fits the password schemes.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely right. Because as an administrator, I might be creating user accounts for everyone. I should not know their passwords, should I? No one should know your passwords unless you should not be sharing your passwords with anyone. Okay, no one else should know your passwords. If I'm meant to access the system, I'm supposed to have my own account. So when I create all these users, doesn't that mean that I know all their passwords? So by checking this box, it ensures that the next time a user logs in, the first time a user logs in, it prompts them to change their password. So therefore, whatever password I've given them, it's no longer that password. And I can't just keep on using it, even though I am the administrator. Remember we talked about auditing, the ability to track what people do? Well, if I'm using someone else's account, whatever I do is tracked under their account, isn't it? By actually forcing them to change the password, it eliminates that as a possibility, or it's still less of a possibility. But I've unchecked it because I don't want to have to change my password it makes it's annoying every time I have to change the password. So I'm just going to create a user for Alex, and I'm going to create a new user for, let's see who. Okay, Evans, E Evans. That's my my example user that I use all the time. And I'll create a user account for that, for them, and I'll close that. So you can see there's my account. There's an account for me. There's an account for Evans F. All right. So in this classroom, what kind of users use this classroom mainly? What kind of users? What are you guys? Students. Where am I? A lecturer. Okay, not administrator. The administrator is the administrator of the network. I'm not. I'm just a lecturer here. So basically, if this was a classroom computer, maybe we'll have an area on the file system called subject files. Okay, let's I hate spaces. So I hate spaces. The reason that is when you're in a command line, spaces cause problems. Okay, so I try to eliminate spaces with underscore or just not having spaces at all. In Linux, it is case sensitive. In Windows, it's not case sensitive. The name of the files and folders. Okay, when I say case, it's uppercase or lowercase. It's not, doesn't make a difference. And let's say this is subject files. So what do you think in this classroom? If we want to have these files for you to learn stuff, oh, there's two types of users. Yeah, because these computers get used by all sorts of students, right? And all sorts of lecturers. What kind of powers do you think a student should be able to have to these files that I want to give you? Read only. And what kind of files? What kind of permissions do you think a lecturer should have? Read and write at the minimum. Maybe modify as well to change the permissions. Change the content. Update the files. Delete files. So therefore, it's always easier to use groups than it is to use individual accounts, because I could potentially in this classroom. Let's just work it out. In this classroom, if I actually looked at how many users have logged in, I can see there's all of these. That's 18 different users, and this is just a computer that's fairly new, as in it's only the start of the semester. But over the whole case, it could be dozens. So instead of giving permissions per user, and we might want to give permissions per group. It's a lot easier. So I could create a new group. Now I'm going to call it students. And let's say that that E Evans is a student. You notice what I did? I just typed in the username and I click check names. I didn't even have to do that. I could just type EE and check names. Oh, I just can't find it. All right. So E Evans. Check name, and it's going to say it's a user account on this computer called E Evans, and that's going to be a member of the student group, and I'll click create. On the other hand, I could also create another group, lecturer. I can just create it. You can see there's the lecturer group, but if I double click on it, there's no one is a member. Okay, I can add members after the fact, or I can actually go to the user and right click and go to properties, go to the member of tab and click add to the lecturers group. So I can do it one way. I can go to the group and add members, or I can go to the users and add them to groups. You guys all hearing me? Understanding what I'm saying? So basically in my scenario that I have is that there's two types of users that use this computer in this room. This is a classroom in TAFE SA, and they need to access this folder which has subject files, which is files we give to the students so that they can do their work. So what we can do now is say, hey, remember what we decided before? We said that we weren't going to let students delete any files or change any files, but we wanted them to be able to read and maybe execute the files if they're executable, right? So what we need to do is we need to take away these two users. you got to understand these two groups. You got to understand that authenticated users represents anyone who can log in, students or lecturers, and users represents any user. But you may notice that I can't actually get rid of them because there's a thing called inheritance. So you might have heard that term in the actual normal English. Inheritance is what you get if your parents leave you something after they pass away. Well, in IT, inheritance is the permissions that we inherit, or the attributes we inherit from the level above. So if we look at the C drive and go look at the permissions, you'll see that authenticated users and users are there, and at this level I can remove them. But I don't want to remove them at that level because they're there for a reason. But at this level I need to remove them. So what we can do is we can actually go to advanced, and we can actually disable inheritance. When we disable inheritance, we basically is turning off those permissions or those things coming down from above. You guys all with me? Okay, good. You with me, Tran? All right, good. So when we remove inheritance, we can remove all permissions. Just leave it, start with blank slate. We can do that. But it just means that we have a possibility of locking ourselves out. If we take away everything, we have to put back the things that's required for the system to run properly and for the system to be able to access the files, etc., etc. So what I like to do is I like to convert the inherited permission to explicit permissions. So inherited permissions are coming down from what's above us. Explicit ones are permissions we're given exactly at this level. So we'll convert that and we'll click OK. So now we still got the same ones, but they're not inherited anymore. They're given at this level. So if we click edit, we can actually remove authenticated users, and we can remove users, and which leaves us the system, which is the operating system, and the administrators, which is that administrators group. But now what can we do? We can add, and we can add student. Oops, I think I said students. And we can also add lecturers. I have to sound it out because I'm bad at spelling. I still got it wrong. Lecturers. Oh my goodness.
I think it's just lecturer.
Oh, lecturer. No, yes. Okay, I'm inconsistent, obviously. Yeah, you're right. I was thinking this classroom right now, I guess. Lecturer and students. My bad. So students, we want them to have read. So you can see that there's a whole heap of permissions here. There's read and execute, list folder content, and read. If I untick them all, okay, and I select read and execute, it actually implies everything below it. So it's really a level of access. Once we give that extra higher level, it implies everything that's below it anyway. Yep, question?
Rather than removing the group or usernames from
Yeah,
using inheritance, can't we just click on the user, like the students or something
Yeah.
we didn't want access,
and
just click deny on all of the functions?
Yeah, we can, but that leads to complexity. So you got so that's a good question. So we've got allow permissions and we've got deny permissions. But when we combine permissions, because obviously if I'm a member of the students, I was a member of that users as well, because everyone is. If I denied permissions for users, well, deny is always trump allow. So if I denied everything, I could never give, even if I give full control to the students and I've denied it with another group, they would always be denied. So in general, I don't like using deny because that complicates things, because denies trump allows. So my personal philosophy is, if they don't need the permission, don't give it to them in the first place, because then we don't have to worry about taking it away later. Okay, it's like that's almost like secure by design, in the sense that if we give it to them and have to take it later, what if we forget to take it away from them? Then they might be getting access to things that I'm not aware of. So we don't give it to them if they don't need it. So students have read and execute. which is fine. Lecturers, let's actually give them modify, okay, which also gives them right, because it implies every level below it. All right, so let's adjust that a little bit. I don't want lecturers to actually modify. I just want to show you something a bit weird. I want them to be able to write, create files, create folders. I'll show you something a bit weird. Oh. Okay, so cancel that. I don't know what, I'm not sure what's happening here. All right.
This is probably a dumb question.
Yep.
What's the difference between write and modify?
Yeah, that's the question I was going to demonstrate. Write means you can create files, you can edit files. You can create new files, add new folders, but you can't edit existing files or delete existing files or folders. You get me? You can't delete files. All right, so it's let's just talk about some of these things while that's happening. So folder permissions, so it can be added for groups or users or computers, and it's cumulative for group members. Remember what we talked about? If everyone's already a member of the users, then we give users, and they're also a member of the students, then what permissions do they have? They actually accumulate the permissions. They add the permission from the users, then add the permissions from their students, a group, and they get wherever they get from combining them. They add them together. If adding them together includes a deny, then that deny would trump every other permission. Can be assigned to files, folders, or the whole volume. And permissions can allow or deny, but denies take precedence. So that's what I mean by they trump any allows. And there's basic and advanced permissions. Okay, so this is the basic permissions we've been talking about. But there's more advanced permissions. If I click on the advanced button, we can actually look at all of these things. So besides your basic permissions that we were just talking about, there's traverse folder. What does that actually mean? That means actually be able to move through it, browse through a folder without actually having to be able to see the contents of that folder. And you can create files or write data or create folders or pen data, take ownership. There's so many other ones, but to be honest, 99% of this situations you'll find yourself, those basic permissions will be fine. We talked about inheritance, if you remember. So basically inheritance means that if I've given permission to this folder and this file is inside the folder, those permissions I've given to the folder flows down to that file. Okay. So we can take away inheritance by disabling inheritance, but then you have to decide whether you convert them to explicit permissions, which means that permissions are directly assigned to that object, or remove all permissions. I suggested convert because then you can mess around with it without locking yourself out, and we keep those things like system and administrator in there. There's also this effective access. So let's see how my demonstration is going. Okay, let's cancel that. Let's cancel that. Let's cancel that. Let's open up again and let's look at. Okay, I've taken the modify away. So what if I want to see? Okay, I know this this guy Evan Zerfel. He's a student. But I want to know what effective access. Effective access is when you combine all the permissions they're getting through their group membership, their individual user, their other group membership, and their computer they're sitting on, whatever. Let's actually look at effective access. We'll click on the effective access tab. We select the user, and in this case, E. Evans was our example user. And this allows us now to see what effective access does this person have. So if we had a complicated system of inherited permissions and directly assigned permissions, and this folder or file was actually 20 layers deep, we might lose track of what permissions they have. And this is a way of actually checking. But obviously, nothing is as good as checking by the user. So if I press Control Insert, which is actually Control Alt Delete on a real computer, I can switch user. That means I log in with another user account without having to log off the original one. So let's log in as Evans Earthful Evans, sorry. And obviously, new user to the computer, you go through this we're just setting up things, etc., etc. So while that's happening, let's actually keep on talking. So effective permissions allows you to check that they are getting the right effective permissions at a certain point. The file, the folder, etc. What about if you copy and moving files? When you copy a file and folder, they always inherit the permissions of the destination. So if we put a new file, if we take this file out of wherever it was and put it into that new folder, they will get the permissions for that new folder inherited to them. But if you notice that's copying from one NTFS volume to another NTFS volume. When you copy files or folder, they always, so when you move files, unfortunately, when you move files and folders within the same volume, they keep the explicit permissions. Whatever permissions you've given them specifically goes with them. That's the difference between move and copy, okay? Copy means that you're copying to new location. It's a separate file, whereas move is the same files or same folders into a different location, so they get wherever they're given. When you move files and folders to a different volume, they inherit the permissions at the destination folder. So that's a little bit complicated. So if it's the same volume, they keep the explicit permissions. Different volume, they get the new ones. Okay. What about copy and moving files from different, so here's an example, here's a graphic. So on the C drive, we've got users, we've got which has Mary and a file called file A, and no one has access to this folder, and this public area which everyone, which people have modified to, and this on this D drive, you've got a folder called data, which you have full control is access. So that's for group 1. We copy this file to this new location. What permission would this group 1 have to this file? Guys, what do you think? Modify, because it's going to get wherever the destination folder is for copies. What if we move it? What would they get now? Okay, so this is a move rather than a copy, and this is on the same volume. Sorry? None. The permission will be none. This group 1 will have no permissions. What if we moved it from one volume to another volume? Full control, because it takes on wherever, if it's different volumes, it goes to wherever permissions is at the destination. Okay, so let's go back to our computer. So we've logged in finally, and if we use multiple users using the same computer, we go to our C drive. There's our subject files. If we go in, we can go in because we got the read and execute, don't we? What if we try to create a new folder? Well, I can't. I have to upgrade my access to be able to do that. So that means my default user permissions doesn't give me that, which is what we expected, right? What if we then switch to the lecturer user, Alex? Okay, it's going to go through that hi, how you doing type situation again. And I think let's go back to our PowerPoint, see if we're going to talk about anything else. We will be, but I think we need to finish that off before we move on to the next topic. So what we've been talking about is basically access to the same computer. Okay, just people logging into the same computer and accessing files on that computer. Not talking about accessing it from another computer. It's people who are logging in directly to that computer. Okay, that's what we called local access. But we also know that, hey, this computer doesn't exist by itself. It exists in this network. So we'll talk about shared resources in a minute. So if we actually look at this folder again, and we go and look at that C drive, and we've got this subject files, we can still go in, but we're lecturer now, aren't we? So should I be able to create a new folder or file? Yes. And you can see yes. But if you know how we gave ourselves the right permissions, not modify permissions? See what happens when I try to delete it? I still have to upgrade my permissions. Okay, let's switch back to our original user, and our original user, or the first user we ever installed, created on this system, is always the administrator. So this user is the IT student on this particular computer, is the administrator. And if I go back to the same area and subject files, whoa, I think I logged in as the wrong person. Sorry, guys. So I think I logged in as the wrong person. This user is my first user. Someone else must have created this IT student. So yeah, that's me logged in before. And I can delete the files because I'm the administrator. Like I was saying, this is local access. That's only accessible, this folder, from the local machine. People will have to directly log in to the machine to be able to access the file system. But what if we had people on the network that wanted to access the same things? I can do what's called sharing. I can share a folder, I can share printers, I can share whole drives to people on the network. And we have a different set of permissions. So let's take that folder again. We can just right click on it, properties, and if you remember there's that sharing tab, and we can share this folder, then we assign the share permissions. Whoa, this is another set of permissions, isn't it? So if you remember, we talked about FAT32. FAT32 didn't have file system permissions. Okay, so we couldn't do what we did just in the previous step. The only permissions that we can set on a FAT is actually share permissions. So this is actually left over from when all Windows computers uses FAT. They didn't have file permissions to lock it down. So what I do is I share with everyone full control. You're probably going to say, hey, isn't that a bit dangerous? Full control. Okay, I'm just going to do it anyway. But then, if you remember, we had these permissions that we set with the security tab. That's what we call file system permissions. And in this case, it's on an NTFS volume. So it's a NTFS permissions, often referred to. So when I share it, shared folders are accessible over the network. You can only share volumes and folders. You can't share individual files. Share permissions control access over a network, but they do not apply to users who can access the content locally, meaning on the computer. You must have administrative permissions to create a share. There are many ways to create a share. You can do it by the Windows Explorer, which I did. You can use the share folder snap-in. You can use the NetView. You can use the NetView command. You can use the get samba share commandlets in PowerShell, and you can access the share through what's called a UNC. Oops. So methods available for sharing folders, like I said, you can share with the Windows Explorer, Command Prompt, or PowerShell. And I've shown you how to do it with the Windows Explorer. But there's another graphical tool as well that I haven't shown you. So close that. So if you remember, I used the right click and went to computer management. So besides looking at your users, you can also look at your shared folders. What shares have I got? I've got this subject files. I've got a few other ones that might have been, this other one might have been done for another class. But you might see there's also, hey, an IPC, $, and admin $. that's a bit interesting. What this dollar symbol, what this dollar symbol stands for is that they're hidden shares, which means people can't connect to them unless they know it exists. But you might notice that, hey, this whole C drive is shared. Well, unfortunately, that's a default share that's created on every Windows. So that's a big security risk in my books. That means I know that everyone's got a hidden share called C drive. So couldn't I just type in // the IP address? Okay, let's find out what my IP address is. Oops, I did it too quick. I should have started the command prompt and did it there. IP config, if you remember that command. It's 10.62.28.6. Let me go back to my full clone. Is that on the... Let's go to a full clone and see if that's on the same network. So if you remember, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, that in order to access another computer or communicate with another computer, both computers have to be on the same physical network, both have to have an IP address in the same logical network. So let's actually find out what network this is on. So this is on the bridge also. Okay, so good. So that means both of them are on the same network. And if I actually now, I can do the UNC one or two ways. One way is actually to type in the IP address. Another way is to type in the computer name. Both will work on a local area network. So, but I don't think I've changed the name, but I know the IP address, 28.6. So let's try it that way. 10.62.28.6. Sorry, 10.62.28.6 is my computer on the other computer. And you can see that, hey, there's my subject files. And you can see I can access it immediately. And that's because I'm using the same user account. Okay, if I was using a different user account with a different password, I'll be prompted to log in with an account. But you know what I said? What if, so you notice I can only see share and share files. But I couldn't see the other shares that we saw, did we? Remember there was a C dollar? What if I type in that manually? If I typed in C dollar, well, let's upgrade. It's prompting me for a password, but hopefully we got that right. But that means we can actually access these hidden shares over the network, which is always dangerous. Let's, while we're at it, we can actually also map a network drive. So let's do it. All right, let's map this student files as S drive. And you can see now I've got a S drive, and that's the files. And because I'm the administrator, I can add new documents and stuff like that. And if we go back here, you can see that was the one I just added. But if we actually go here and look at sessions, so remember we can look at shared folders and look at the sessions, I can see that there's a connection right now. An active connection by a user called user, and it's connecting me from a Windows computer, and the computer name is called full clone. Oh, let's close this session. So I can disconnect him if I wanted to. That does nothing, except that it disconnects this session. But if I actually click on it again, it actually reconnects. And if I press F5, it should reconnect. And if we look at open files, you can see, hey, this has actually been opened. Who's opened it? It's opened. It's opened on this other computer, I believe. Or no? Or yes, it is. It's right here. All right. So getting back to our PowerPoint, so I realize I'm taking too long with my demonstrations. Let's get back to our PowerPoint. So we can share with the Windows Explorer as well as this device, this tool. I can create new shares from that location as well. I can also share with the command prompt. You can see you can use the net share command. And it's going to be called this, and it's going to be equal to the C drive folder 1 folder. We can also share with the PowerShell commandlets, but like I said, this is something that we're not going to focus on. We're going to focus on the graphical user interfaces. And we can look at the share folder properties, as in this is what's called. You can share a folder and call it something else than what the folder name is called if you wanted to. Number of connections. So this means how many people can access the share at the same time, simultaneous connections. Caching. So this is interesting. You can choose which files or programs, if any, are available to users offline. Well, what does that mean? That means that obviously if you got a laptop and you got access to a shared folder, but you then disconnect your laptop and take it home, you can't access those files anymore. What if you were about to do something? So by caching some of these files, that means you can actually take it offline and work on it. And when you get back online, it will update where it was with the changes. And we can set permissions there. We can look at shared folder properties with the PowerShell as well. And basically, we spoke about already how when we combine, so what if we got shared permissions and we had those NTFS permissions, remember the file system permissions? But obviously we're coming over a network, both will apply to us. We're coming over the network, the share permissions apply. When we get to the file system applies. So we both, the share permissions and the NTFS permissions applies to me if I'm accessing over a network. So what happens? Well, you combine the share permissions and the NTFS permissions together. But it's not like what we said before, it's not cumulative. It's actually the most restrictive wins, which means that if I have shared full control and NTFS self-read-only, when you combine them, I've only got read-only. That's because that's more restrictive. So that's why when I shared just then, I shared with full control, and I wasn't really worried because I already set the NTFS permissions with the right permissions. So really, we open up with share to open up to the network, and we lock down with the NTFS or file system permissions to control access. So users can read the file. So if people are accessing it over the network and they've got read, they can read the file. But when you go to the NTFS, they can read the file. So yes, they can read the file. They can next is they want to change the file. They come through the share with change. But when they get to the file system, they don't have the right permissions in this example. So they are stopped from changing. Now they coming over with full control. In this case, they have no full control. And obviously, they get blocked there. You see, that's how when you combine share and NTFS permissions, both will apply to you. But share permissions is not that powerful in the sense that when I can access the computer locally, directly, those share permissions do not apply to me at all. So I'll rather edit the NTFS permissions rather than any share permissions because that applies in both situations. What are work folders? So we're going to go through this work folders fairly quickly because it's not something we're going to do because it requires you to have a server. Okay, we're not going to talk about servers in this subject. We're going to talk about it in another subject. So work folders allow users to access their individual data. Users can access only their own work folders. Enable data to be stored centrally on a traditional file servers. File servers must be running 7 2016 or newer. Allows users to use multiple devices for access regardless of where the device is domain joined or not. So basically, we're going to discuss domains more in the next subject. But when you're in a domain, like I said, you're part of a trust. You're trusted. When you're not in the domain, you're not trusted. So for example, all of these computers are in a domain. So that's why you can access all your L drive and S drive easily. Okay? But if you brought your laptop, you can't access the network shares. because your computer is not part of the domain. But with this idea of this work folders, if we have work folders, it means that we can allow people who have BYOD. What does that stand for? Bring your own device, which is more and more likely these days, to also access domain resources without having to join them to the domain, because they're not owned by TAFE, they're owned by you. I don't want to join your computers and lock your computers down with TAFE SA restrictions, but I still want to give you access to resources. That's what work folders is for. Allows access to company data from any location with network access. So basically, what does that mean? That means, hey, I don't have to be on site. We could potentially set up this work folders to be accessible off-site, not through a VPN connection or anything like that, but just be accessible as a resource. A local copy is available on the device, which users can access when there's no network connectivity. That's similar to that caching we were talking about. Ensures compliance with company policies, so we can still control through access control, quotas, file screening, classification, and more. And we also can set encryption on your local copy of your data or remote wipe your data, your company data. So components of work folder, you need a work folder server. So you need to install file and storage services, additional access protocols, and use server manager to consolidate the sync. You need a sync share, multiple sync shares per work folder share. Users can associate with a sync share or define device policies per sync share, and then you have your user devices, which is your computers, your laptops, your iPads, your Android devices, your iOS devices. Like I said, I'm going through this quickly because this is something good to know of, but it's not essential for this subject. So here's the work folder server, and we have laptops, which we are working on data, putting data up. Then we have modification, and we access by other devices, and they're modifying it, and they can even take an offline version. So configure work folders, we can create a sync share on a file server. You must install work folders role servers first. You can deploy the work folder ways in 3 ways. Manual, which is a manual use automatic discovery of servers based on their email address. Users can enter the work folder URL manually. There's an opt-in method as well, which are settings that deliver by group policies and configuration manager or Microsoft iTunes. You'll learn group policy in the future subjects. You'll learn system center configuration manager in future subjects. There's also mandatory, which are settings delivered by group policies, configuration manager, or Microsoft Intune. No user actions required in this mandatory. These other ones require users to do something. Mandatory means it's fully automatic. So printers, you gotta. We're now going to talk about printers. We all know what printers are. They're things that we put paper in, and our Word documents get printed into the physical world rather than just being on the screen. Okay, but these printers, these physical devices, like the one you see in the back corner there, we call them printers, don't we, in just average English. But in Microsoft, in this networking, we're going to call them print devices. Okay, so they're the actual physical entities that does the printing. They're print devices. Then there's also printers. That's a little bit confusing. So in our speak now, from now on, those physical devices are going to be called print devices, whereas this icon here, that's an icon of that print device, is what we call a printer. Really, this is just a print queue. Okay, so when I double clicked on it, I can open up a print queue. And I can see what documents are waiting to be printed. So this graphical, this representation on my computer is the printer, but really it's a print queue to that print device. Okay, so there's also printer ports. So how are printers connected to your computer? Traditionally, it's been connected through LPT ports. No one probably uses LPT ports now. Or more recently, it's USB. Okay, you you connect to USB. But probably more likely nowadays is TCP/IP. Who's got a printer at home? Who's got a printer at home which has got wireless access? You know, how do you do your Reese? How do you do your print? USB, right? So basically, most printers you buy these days, especially for home and small home business, usually have some sort of Wi-Fi component or a Ethernet port. So basically, less and less likely any printer is going to be directly connected to a computer. But we can connect it through various ports. So let me just add a printer. So if I go to Control Panel, and I'll go to Hardware, Sound, we go to Devices and Printers, and I'm going to add a printer. Okay, these are, so obviously this is a virtual machine. There's not going to be a real printer is connected. Okay, there's no real printer connected. But what we can do is we can actually manually set it up, and I can set it up by obviously if it was a real one, I can plug and play where it automatically detected. But I can also add a printer based in IP address or host name. So I can choose that, and I'm going to say, hey, what is the IP address? 110. Oops. I don't have a real printer. I can just type an IP address, the IP address of the printer, hopefully. And it's not. Oh, cancel that. So I think I forgot to uncheck something, so it might take a little bit longer. Darn it. All right, so I'm going to add a TCP/IP, but I'm not going to query it. That's the thing I forgot. If I query it, it's going to try to talk to it. But I know that in this virtual world, it's never going to answer. So it's just going to waste my time. So I'm not going to query it. I'll go next. It's still going to take a bit of time, but while that's happening, we can create, what I was doing there was creating what's called a TCP/IP port. And basically that's how we're going to connect to that particular example of printer. So the printer port is a port through which the printing device is connected. The printer is a Windows 10 representation of the print device. And a printer driver. So driver is the software that makes a bit of hardware work properly. So if it's a specific model, we want to use all its features, we can actually use that software to get it to work right. Benefits of Type 4 printer drivers is a single driver can support multiple devices. A driver is isolated, preventing file naming conflicts. Clients can download drivers through Windows updates. And driver packages are smaller and install faster. You can deploy a printer or printer driver and the printer user interface. We can manage client-side. Managing client-side printing. So as a client, as a user, I can see my print queue, and I can cancel, stop, restart, pause the print jobs, or even reorder. Yeah, so we can manage client-side printing by doing that as well. And but we can also share printers. When we share printers, we make this printer that's connected to our computer available to the network. And also, when it's available to the network, let's put in this Kaisera something or other. It doesn't matter. It's a fictitious printer. We'll call it let's see, a 105 printer for this classroom. And do I want to share this printer? I can share it now, or I can share it later. I'll share, do not share. I'll click finish. Here's my printer, and I can actually go to print properties, and I can share it again. I can also adjust the permissions. So the three permissions that we have for printing is the ability to print, to manage the documents. So as in, if I have the manage documents, inside I see my documents, I can see everyone else's documents in the print queue, and I can cancel other people's documents. And if I can manage the printer, that means I can actually change the settings of the printer. Okay, change the sharing, change stuff like that. But we won't necessarily do that right this second. So once it's shared, we can also look at the sharing in that tool that we had before. So if you remember, we looked at shares. So we had these folders, and let's see, yep. And we can also go to the print service. Print server management is the tool. And if we have the print server management, this is my local computer. If we look at printers, there's that printer that I just created. I can open up the queue and see what print jobs are there. And I can, if I have the power, I can manage I definitely can manage my own print jobs. But if I have the power, I can manage other people's print jobs as well. But really, what are we talking about? We're talking about peer-to-peer networking today, aren't we? Everything we've been doing is really been doing it on a Windows 10 computer. Really, that's really only for home network small businesses. Anyone that's got more than a small business will soon realize they probably want a server to do some of these things, because a server gives us access to Active Directory, gives us access to Active Directory user accounts and group accounts. So what we're doing today in the worksheet is all about peer-to-peer networking. But the sort of coincidence is that our assessment, if you look at it, is about a company which has peer-to-peer networking at this stage. But in the future, maybe we'll upgrade them to Active Directory. So right now, go do your worksheet, worksheet 8, which will walk you through how to manage some of the file shares and printer sharing.